She had worn this dress to celebrate. The Valentino gown had arrived 3 weeks ago in a flat black box tied with a ribbon the color of midnight, and Mila had lifted it out with both hands the way you lift something you know is going to matter. Floor length. Deep wine red with a structured bodice that tapered into a skirt that moved like water when she walked. It had cost the kind of money that made her accountant clear his throat twice before approving it, and she had laughed and told her to approve it anyway because there were very few moments in a woman's life that deserved a dress like this one, and she intended to be ready when hers arrived. Tonight was supposed to be that moment. The closing of the biggest acquisition in M&M Group's history. $2 billion. Her negotiation. Her vision. Her decade of working 18-hour days and eating airport sandwiches and sitting in boardrooms where men twice her age looked at her like she had walked into the wrong building. All of it standing in one glittering, undeniable moment. She had planned everything. The dinner. The champagne. The speech she had rehearsed in her bathroom mirror 3 times that week, not because she needed to, but because this one deserved to be said perfectly. She had not planned for the folder. Welcome to Black Silk Stories, the home of Afro-Korean stories that hit different. Subscribe, drop a comment, and do not go anywhere. This is only the beginning. The folder had been sitting inside the 3rd drawer of Woo Jin's private desk, the drawer he kept locked, the one she had never opened in 2 years of marriage because she had never needed to, because she had trusted him the way you trust someone you chose with your whole chest and your open eyes and every careful instinct you spent years developing. The lock had been broken. Not forced. The small brass mechanism had simply given out from age, and when Mila pulled the drawer open looking for the dinner reservation card she had slipped in there 2 weeks ago, the folder was just sitting there. Brown. Unremarkable. Labeled in Woo Jin's handwriting. PD. She almost closed the drawer. Almost. But Mila Adeyemi had built M&M Group from a single logistics company she inherited at 24 into a conglomerate worth 9 figures by reading every document that crossed her path. Contracts, footnotes, appendices that lawyers assumed no one ever read. It was not paranoia. It was the discipline that separated her from people who almost made it. So she opened the folder. And there, beneath a lease agreement and an insurance policy, was a marriage certificate. Luncha. Unipark. Married. She read the date. 7 years ago. The dining room of their Seoul penthouse was the kind of room that appeared in architecture magazines. Floor-to-ceiling glass. The city spread below like a circuit board lit from underneath. The table was set for 2 white linen, crystal, candles that Yuna had arranged that morning with the same quiet efficiency she brought to everything. Yuna, who had worked for Mila for 18 months before Mila met Woo Jin, who had handed Mila her coffee every morning and known every password and sat outside every closed-door meeting and smiled that small, careful smile whenever Mila thanked her, who had been his wife for 7 years. Mila stood in the doorway of the dining room in her wine-red Valentino gown, the folder in her hand, and looked at her husband across the candlelit table. Woo Jin was already seated, his dinner jacket a perfect charcoal, his shirt the color of pale bone, his cufflinks catching the light every time he reached for his water glass. He was handsome in the way that certain men are handsome. Assembled, deliberate, every element chosen to produce a specific effect. She had found that attractive once. "You changed," he said, looking up from his phone. His eyes moved over the gown with something that looked like appreciation. "You look extraordinary." "I know," Mila said. She walked to the table. She sat down across from him. She placed the folder between the 2 dinner plates and watched his face. For 3 full seconds nothing moved in it. Then something did. Something small and fast that was gone before it fully arrived. But Mila had spent 2 years studying this face across breakfast tables and boardroom video calls and lazy Sunday mornings, and she caught it. The way you catch a flame going out. Not the darkness but the last flicker before it. "What is this?" he said. His voice was measured. Calm. The voice of a man who had prepared for many conversations. "I think you know what it is," Mila said. "Mila." "Yuna Park," she said. Quietly. Clearly. The way she said difficult things in boardrooms, without heat, without trembling, because the truth did not need decoration. 7 years, Woo Jin. You have been married to my personal assistant for 7 years. The candles burned between them. "Let me explain. I need you to do something for me first," she said. "Before you explain anything. Before you say whatever you have been practicing for however long you have been practicing it." She leaned forward slightly. The Valentino gown caught the candlelight and held it. Look me in the eye and tell me that Yuna does not know who I am." The silence that followed was its own answer. Mila nodded slowly. She stood up. "Mila." His voice shifted. Still controlled but with an edge entering it now. "Sit down. We can discuss this like." "I built M&M Group," she said, picking up her clutch from the table. "Small. Black. Bulma. I built it before you existed in my life and I will build it long after this conversation. Whatever you married me for. And I think I understand now exactly what that was. I want you to know that you miscalculated one thing." "And what is that?" She looked at him one last time. "Me," she said. And she walked out. She made it 4 blocks before her hands started shaking. Not from fear. She would examine that later and find that it was grief. The specific and savage grief of realizing that something you believed in completely was constructed entirely to deceive you. That the life you were living was a stage set. That the people closest to you were reading from a script you were never given. Her heels were 4 inches and the sole pavement was uneven and she was 36 weeks pregnant and none of that mattered because she needed to move. She needed the city around her and the night air and the distance between herself and that penthouse and the man sitting in it. She turned left off the main boulevard into a narrower street lined with older buildings, the kind of street the city had not yet gotten around to modernizing. Quieter here. Darker. The sounds of the main road fading behind her. Her phone was at 11%. She had left the charger on the desk in her office because she had planned to be at a dinner, not walking the streets of Seoul in the dark in a Valentino gown with a baby pressing against her ribs and her entire marriage dismantled inside a brown folder. She tried to call her lawyer. No answer. She tried her best friend in New York. Straight to voicemail. Then she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. 2 men. Moving with a specific kind of purpose that had nothing to do with coincidence. Dark jackets. Hands loose at their sides. Watching her. He sent people. The thought arrived with a coldness that settled in her chest and stayed there. He knew I would run and he already had people waiting. She turned and walked faster. The baby shifted inside her, heavy and low, and a sharp ache moved through her lower back. The kind she had been feeling on and off for 2 days and dismissing because she had a celebration to attend and a company to run. She turned a corner. Then another. Her left heel caught a crack in the pavement and snapped, the sound like a small gunshot in the quiet street. And she stumbled, caught herself against a wall and stood there breathing. The wall was cold through the back of her gown. The city hummed somewhere above and around her. Her back was screaming now, long and insistent, and she understood with the sudden and total clarity that comes when the body overrules the mind that this was not stress. The baby was coming. "No," she whispered. "Not tonight. Not here. Please not here." Her body did not negotiate. She pressed herself against the wall and looked back around the corner. The 2 men had stopped at the end of the street. Looking. Not yet seeing her. She needed help. She needed it right now. She looked up and down the narrow street, and that was when she saw him. A boy. Standing at the opposite corner not 10 meters away, watching her with an expression that was neither afraid nor confused. He was small, 7, perhaps 8, but he was standing with a kind of stillness that did not belong to children who wandered out alone at night by accident. His outfit stopped her even now, even in this moment. A charcoal-fitted suit with a faint pinstripe, a white shirt with a collar that sat perfectly, and dark shoes that caught what little light the street offered. He looked like someone had taken a photograph of a powerful man and scaled it down without removing a single element of the authority in it. He was looking at her like she was a problem he had already decided to solve. "Please," Mila said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Please help me. The baby is coming and they are after me." The boy's eyes moved past her to the end of the street, then back to her face. He did not flinch. He did not look uncertain. "Who?" he said. His Korean was clear and unhurried. His eyes were serious in the way that some children's eyes are serious, not because childhood left them early, but because they were born paying attention. Mila opened her mouth to answer. And then the pain came long, deep and absolute, and she gripped the wall and closed her eyes and breathed through it the way she breathed through every hard thing. Completely. Without surrender. The boy was already moving. He reached into the inner pocket of his fitted charcoal jacket and pulled out a phone that looked too expensive for a child and too naturally held for it to be anything but ordinary to him. He dialed with one hand and stepped slightly in front of her, between her and the direction the men had come from, like it was simply the place he was supposed to stand. The call connected on the first ring. "Daddy," the boy said. His voice was calm, certain. The voice of someone reporting to someone they trusted completely. "I found them and they need help. Emergency." He hung up before the person on the other end could respond. Then he dialed again. "Emergency services this time." He spoke quickly, clearly, giving the street name and cross street and the word "pregnant," and the word "now" with the efficiency of someone who had been taught that panic was a waste of seconds you might need. Mila stared at him. "What is your name?" she asked, because she needed something to hold on to, and his steadiness was the only solid thing on this street. He looked up at her from the phone. "Jum," he said. "How old are you, Jum?" 7. He said it without apology, without the self-consciousness of a child who knows an adult is surprised by them. Just a fact. "Can you walk a few more steps? There is a wider entrance around this corner. Easier for them to find us." Them. He was already thinking about who was coming to help and how to make it easier for them to arrive. Mila almost laughed. The laugh arrived somewhere behind her sternum and stayed there, caught between exhaustion and something that felt dangerously close to gratitude. "Yes," she said. "I can walk." She pushed off the wall. He moved beside her, not ahead, not behind, beside her, which was not something she would have expected from anyone in this moment, let alone a 7-year-old in a pinstripe suit, and they walked together to the wider entrance he had identified. Behind them, at the end of the street, she heard the footsteps again. Getting closer. The wider entrance Jum had identified was the recessed doorway of an old building whose tenant had long since moved out. The door behind them was solid. The overhead ledge was deep enough to keep them out of direct sightline from the street. Jum had seen all of this in the 10 seconds he had stood at that corner before Mila even noticed him, which was the kind of spatial awareness that did not come from school or television but from a life lived beside a man who always knew where every exit was before he walked into any room. Mila leaned against the door frame and breathed. The pain was coming in waves now, long and rolling, receding just enough to let her think before returning with quiet authority. She had read every book, attended every class her obstetrician recommended. She knew what this was and she knew what it meant, and the knowledge did not make it smaller. Simply gave it a name. Active labor. Alone on a dark street in Seoul. In a Valentino gown. "Talk to me," she said to Jum, because silence made the pain louder and this boy's voice was the steadiest thing in her immediate world. "Tell me something." Jum was standing at the edge of the doorway, watching the street with his hands clasped behind his back. The posture was so precisely adult that it pulled at something in Mila's chest even through the pain. "What do you want me to tell you?" he asked without turning around. "Anything. How did you end up out here tonight?" He was quiet for a moment, still watching the street. "I wanted to walk alone," he said. "I asked my guards to stay back." Mila processed this information. "You have guards," she said. "Yes." "And you are 7. "Yes." She exhaled through a contraction, pressing the back of her head against the door frame, her wine-red gown pooling slightly at her feet where the broken heel had altered her stance. When it passed, she looked at him. This small, serious boy in his pinstripe suit standing watch like it was his given assignment. "Are they coming?" she asked. "Your guards." "They are already here," Jum said simply. "They were always close. They just did not want me to know." Something in his voice when he said it. Not resentment, not embarrassment, but a private amusement, like he had known all along and found it more endearing than irritating. He turned to look at her then, and his expression was composed and careful. "The emergency team is also coming," he said. "I gave them this street. They will find us." "And your father?" Mila asked. "The person you called first." Something shifted in Jum's face. "Not much, but enough. My father protects people," he said. It was not an explanation. It was a statement of fact delivered with the quiet pride of a boy who had decided very early what he believed about the most important person in his life. "When I see someone who needs protecting, I call him." "That is what you do." Mila looked at him for a long moment. "Jum," she said softly. "Yes. Thank you." He nodded once. Seriously. Like gratitude was something he received with the same steadiness he gave everything else. Then his eyes moved back to the street and his chin lifted slightly, and Mila followed his gaze and saw them. The 2 men in dark jackets rounding the corner, their eyes moving across the street slowly, methodically, the way people move when they are searching and confident they will find what they are looking for. Mila's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. Do not move, Jum said quietly. Stay in the shadow. He stepped to the very edge of the doorway. He did not hide. He simply stood there in his charcoal pinstripe suit with his hands still clasped behind his back, perfectly visible, perfectly still, a small boy on a street at night. One of the men's eyes landed on him and slid away, because what they were looking for was a woman, and a child standing alone was not what they were looking for. And sometimes the best camouflage in the world is something the threat has already decided is irrelevant. The men moved on. Mila let out a breath so slowly it was almost soundless. How did you know to do that? She whispered. Jum stepped back into the shadow of the doorway. My father says the thing they are not looking for is always the safest place to stand, he said. The emergency team arrived 6 minutes later. 2 vehicles. White with blue markings. The lead paramedic was a compact woman in a navy uniform who moved with the briskness of someone who had delivered babies in worse situations than this and intended to deliver this one with the same outcome as all the others, safely. Her name tag read Park Soo-jin, and she took one look at Mila, one look at the gown, one look at the broken heel and said, "All right. Let us get you out of this street." Without a single unnecessary word, which Mila found deeply comforting. I need a moment, Mila said. You can have it in the vehicle, Soo-jin said. I need to. There are 2 men. They were just. Ma'am. Soo-jin's voice was firm and kind in equal measure. Whatever is happening outside this vehicle is not my business tonight. Getting you and this baby to the hospital is. Can you walk to the stretcher? I can walk anywhere, Mila said, which was mostly true. She pushed off the door frame and straightened, all 5 feet 9 inches of her, Valentino gown and broken heel and 36 weeks of pregnancy and 2 hours of the worst evening of her adult life. And she walked to the stretcher with her shoulders back because Mila Adeyemi did not arrive anywhere collapsed. Jum walked beside her. At the vehicle, Soo-jin turned to him with an expression that recalibrated when she properly looked at him. The suit, the shoes, the composure. Are you family? She asked. No, Jum said. Then I am afraid you cannot. He stays close, Mila said from the stretcher. She looked at Soo-jin directly. He found me. He called you. He stays close to this vehicle until his people take him. Soo-jin looked at Jum again. Jum looked back at her with an expression that communicated, politely but clearly, that this had already been decided. Soo-jin moved on. The 2 bodyguards appeared from the shadow of the adjacent building 30 seconds later. Both tall. Both in dark suits that were well cut and well worn in the way of men who wore serious clothing for serious reasons. The older one, broad-shouldered with a jaw like a shelf, approached Jum with the particular expression of a man who had spent the last 20 minutes in controlled alarm, and was only now allowing himself to look relieved. His name was Beck. He had been assigned to Jum for 3 years, and he privately believed that this child was going to give him gray hair before the year was finished. Young master, he said. Beck, Jum said. I need you to follow the medical vehicle to the hospital, and make sure no one comes near it. There are 2 men on this street. Dark jackets. They were following the lady. Beck looked at the medical vehicle, then at Jum, then at the street around them. Young master, your father. I spoke to my father, Jum said, which was technically accurate if abbreviated. The lady and her baby are my responsibility tonight. Can you do what I asked? Beck's jaw moved slightly. He looked at the second guard, younger, leaner, whose name was Tae and who had the good sense to look at the ground whenever the young master and Beck were negotiating. Yes, Beck said. Because in 3 years he had learned that Jum did not make requests that did not need to be made. Good, Jum said. I will ride with you. You will ride with. I told her I would stay close, Jum said. I gave her my word. The word in the mouth of a 7-year-old boy standing in a dark Seoul street in a pinstripe suit landed with a weight that Beck felt in his chest. He straightened slightly. Yes, young master, he said. Inside the medical vehicle, between contractions, Mila stared at the ceiling and did the thing she had been refusing to do since she walked out of the penthouse. She thought about Yuna. Not Woojin. Woojin she could metabolize. Men who married for money were a known category of human. She could place him, understand him, file him under the correct label and deal with him in the correct way in the correct time. But Yuna who had sat across from her desk in the interview and said, I want to work for someone building something real, with a directness that Mila had respected immediately. Yuna who had learned Mila's schedule and her preferences and her moods with an attention that Mila had mistaken for loyalty. Yuna, who had stood beside her at the hospital for Mila's first prenatal appointment, and said, "This is so exciting," with her eyes bright and her hands clasped in front of her neat charcoal blazer. Had she known then? Had she known the whole time? Of course she had. The answer settled in Mila's stomach like cold water and sat there. She closed her eyes. "You will not fall apart in this vehicle," she told herself. "You will not fall apart tonight. This baby is coming and you will be present for it because this baby did not build a conspiracy, and this baby deserves a mother who arrives." The contraction came back. She breathed. In the front of the vehicle, Jum sat beside Beck and watched the city pass through the window. The lights of Seoul moved across the glass in long ribbons, white and gold and the occasional red. The city looked exactly the same as it always did, which was something that always struck him about difficult moments. Everything outside stayed the same. Only the inside changed. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. "Dad." He answered. "Daddy." "Jum." Hosie's voice came through the speaker, low, controlled, with a current of something underneath it that was not quite alarm and not quite calm. The voice of a man measuring every word because he needed information before he chose his response. "Where are you?" "Beck says you are in a vehicle. Following the medical team to the hospital," Jum said. "There was a lady. She was alone and someone was chasing her and her baby was coming. I called the emergency number and Beck is making sure she gets there safely." A pause. "Are you safe?" "Yes." "The lady, who is she?" "Her name is Mila," Jum said. "She was wearing a red dress. She was scared but she did not show it, Daddy." "Not really." "She walked to the stretcher with her back straight." Another pause. Longer this time. "I am on my way back," Hoseo said. "I will be in Seoul in 3 hours. You stay with Beck. You do not leave his side." "Understood." "Yes, Daddy." "Jum." "Yes." "You did well," Hoseo said. Quietly. Simply. The way he said the things that mattered. Jum looked out the window at the passing city. "She needed someone," he said. "I was there." "Yes," his father said. "You were." The hospital corridor was white and wide and smelled of antiseptic and recycled air. Mila was moved through it in the kind of focused, organized urgency that hospitals produce when something is genuinely imminent, and Beck handled the front desk and the paperwork with the efficiency of a man who had navigated difficult institutions on short notice before. Jum sat in the waiting area outside the maternity ward on a chair that was slightly too large for him, his jacket still buttoned, his posture still straight, his hands resting on his knees. A nurse passing by stopped and looked at him. "Are you here alone, little one?" she asked. "I am waiting," Jum said. "For who?" "For news," he said. "About the lady in the red dress. And her baby." The nurse's expression softened in the particular way of people who encountered something unexpectedly moving. "Are you family?" she asked. Jum considered this. "Not yet," he said. 2 hours and 11 minutes later, Beck's phone rang. He listened, said 3 words, hung up. He walked to where Jum was sitting, still straight-backed, still awake, though his eyes had grown heavier in the last 40 minutes, and crouched down to his level. "The baby came," Beck said. "A girl. Both are safe." Jum nodded slowly. Something in his small face moved, not a smile exactly, but the particular settling of features that happens when something you were holding very carefully can finally be put down. "Good," he said. Beck studied him for a moment. "Young master," he said carefully, "your father lands in 2 hours. He will come here directly." "I know," Jum said. "He is going to want to understand everything that happened tonight." "I know that too," Jum said. Beck was quiet for a moment. "The lady," he said. "Mila. Our people did a brief check while you were waiting. She is." He paused, choosing the next word with the care of a man who understood that information given to this particular child always landed somewhere meaningful. "She is a significant person." Jum looked at him. "She was scared and alone on a street," Jum said. "That is all that mattered tonight." Beck straightened up. "Yes, young master," he said. Down the corridor, the door to the maternity ward opened. A nurse stepped out, looked toward the waiting area, and her eyes found Jum. "The patient," she said, walking toward them. "The lady in the she is asking for the boy. She says." The nurse paused like she was double-checking the accuracy of what she was about to say. "She says she wants to thank the boy who stayed." Jum stood up from the chair. He straightened his jacket. He ran one hand briefly over his collar. Then he stopped, because at the far end of the corridor, past the nurse, past the maternity ward doors, past everything, a man had just walked in from the main entrance. Tall, broad-shouldered, a black wool overcoat over a dark suit, traveling straight from wherever he had been without stopping to change, and still looking like the room should rearrange itself around him. His face was sharp and still, and his eyes moved across the corridor with the practiced sweep of a man who read every room he walked into before he walked all the way into it. His eyes found Jum first. Then they moved to the maternity ward door. Then they moved to the nurse. And then slowly, to the name on the patient board behind the nurse's station. Mila Adeyemi. Hoseo went very still. Something crossed his face. Fast. Controlled. Gone before anyone who did not know him would have caught it. But Jum caught it. Because Jum had spent 7 years watching his father's face the way other children watch the sky. For information, for weather, for what was coming. And what he saw there now was not confusion. It was not the face of a man seeing a stranger's name. It was something older than that. Something that had been buried a long time. Daddy, Jum said slowly. Do you know her? Hoseo looked at his son. For 3 full seconds he said nothing. And in those 3 seconds the entire shape of the night shifted. Black silk stories, where Afro-Korean stories are told with the depth, elegance, and fire they deserve. If this story already has you feeling things, wait until you see what episode 2 brings. Subscribe so you never miss a moment. Drop a comment and tell us what you felt watching this. Share it with someone who needs a story that hits different. Black Silk Stories is just getting started. And trust us, you do not want to be late for what is coming.